Okay, so today we're going to talk about chapter 13, which is soil evidence. Forensic soil evidence analysis often is the key to solving crimes. Soil evidence is valuable because soil is found everywhere and is easily located. It can be transported, it's easily collected, and it can be analyzed based on its composition. Soil has diverse and unique properties. Forensic soil analysts use soil sciences, geology, chemistry, mineralogy, and biology to analyze the composition of what it is that they are looking at. Soil differences and trace evidence are used by to link people or objects to a crime scene. Now, as I mentioned on the prior slide, it is valuable evidence, primarily because it's found everywhere. Soil is found everywhere. It is easily located, transported, collected, and analyzed. It is formed by a complicated process. Not only is it found everywhere, but depending on where you're located, soil is different. It is influenced by many environmental factors, distinctive physical and chemical characteristics. And soil samples are similar to, but not as specific as fingerprints, but a lot of information can actually be found. So if we look at the overall history of forensic soil examination, early use of soil as evidence, in 1893, Dr. Gross believed in the value of soil as trace evidence. In 1904, a German investigator used soil evidence to solve a crime. And today, it's used for investigating burial sites, tracking the origin of drugs, and estimating post-mortem interval using microbes in the soil. Now, if we look at the science of soil, the top layer of the Earth's crust is weathered rock, microorganisms, and decaying organic matter, as well as water and air. The formation is affected by climate and living organisms, chemical and physical wearing. Soil, which is one of nature's basic and essential substances, is oftentimes overlooked and taken for granted. There are many ways in which soil plays a role in our lives. For example, it plays a source of minerals, source of fuel. It's actually the home for many animals, substrate for maintaining a balanced ecosystem, a place to bury our dead, materials for the creation of pottery, and materials used to construct buildings, bridges, dams, and manufacture glass. When we look at soil formation, soil, as I mentioned a few minutes ago, is the top layer of the Earth's crust that usually covers the bedrock. And it's a mixture of weathered rock, microorganisms, decaying organic matter, water, and air. The chemical composition of soil depends on the following. One, the mineral content, which is what is found in the soil. What naturally occurring crystalline structures are found in the soil. Two, the type of rocks that are formed in the soil. Three, the local climate. And four, the type of the environment that we're talking about. Now, looking at soil texture, most soils are going to end up being mixtures. For example, with sand, it's going to be pretty coarse. Coarse means it's actually going to be a larger particle size. And we typically will find sand in deserts, beaches, and riverbeds. And some characteristics about sand is that it loses water, air, and circulates easily. Silt, this is a sort of a medium as far as particle size. It is very gritty, and it's found in the sediment of riverbeds. And one of the properties or characteristics of silt is that it's able to retain water. And then finally, clay is very fine. It's going to be the smallest of the particles. Typically, it feels sticky when it's wet and smooth when it's dry. Location, it can be varied, and it will also retain water. And we have various classifications of soil based on the percentages of sand, silt, and clay. And in your book, in figure 13.1, you can actually see the difference in size of these different components. Now, when we look at soil chemistry, this influences and is influenced by plant and animal life living and decomposing in the area. What we're going to find is nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, and calcium. And they will influence plant growth, and they will also affect the pH of the soil. So when we look at soil profiles, sand, silt, or clay that is deposited by wind or water is called sediment. Sediment on dry land will settle into soil horizons or layers that are more or less parallel to the Earth's surface. In this figure here, you can see the soil in each horizon has the characteristic properties. The soil in a given geographic area will have a unique soil profile or a sequence of layers. Each soil horizon within the profile is labeled with an uppercase letter, commonly O, A, E, B, C, or R, from top to bottom. The three main soil profiles are A, B, and C. The top layer, O, is the organic layer. The E layer refers to soil formed by elevation, or the movement of organic matter and minerals due to a downward movement of water. The R layer refers to rock. And here you can see the A, B, and C as well. A is typically topsoil, B is a subsoil, and C is broken rock. So talking about soil and decomposition, the effects of decomposing bodies. All right, sorry about that. Let me get back to that. There we go. Okay, so the type of soil has an effect on the rate and manner of decomposition. In turn, a decomposing body has an effect on soil. Understanding this interaction is useful when trying to investigate crimes. When a body is buried directly in the soil, it's going to affect the chemistry of that soil in a complex of ways. Toxic chemicals, products of decomposition, along with nutrient-rich decomposition fluids, will seep out of the body and enter the soil. A cadaver decomposition island is formed by the unique concentrations of decomposition products that initially kills vegetation. So what you're often going to see with these cadaver decomposition islands or CDIs is going to be an isolated area of barren plant growth. Aeration by animals and insects will lead to rapid vegetation growth afterwards. The effect of soil on decomposing bodies depends on the burial depth and rock content, soil mixture and underground water, the texture of the soil, pH, and oxygen levels. So if we kind of expand upon this a little bit more and talk about the burial depth and rock content, heavy concentrations of rock in the soil may discourage someone from digging a deep grave and cause them to leave a body more exposed to the surface, animal activity, and elements. The deeper the body is buried, the more limited the invertebrate and other predator activity. Soil moisture and underground water. Soils with higher moisture content increase the likelihood of adipocete formation, which is a waxy substance sometimes produced in a later stage of decomposition from the fat of the body. With soil texture, clay soil moistens bones. Bones expand when they are absorbed by the moisture, and they will contract when the soil around them dries. Cycles of expanding and contracting will weaken the bones. Soil pH, acidic areas such as peat bogs will lead to the tanning of the skin and can preserve bodies for centuries. And then finally, the oxygen levels. In anaerobic, low oxygen environments, the gases are produced by decomposition of the body proteins. Their stench can attract trained cadaver dogs to bodies in shallow graves. Cadaver dogs, which, with their keen sense of smell, have been trained to locate buried bodies. The sand is the larger of the three textures of soil, and because it provides many interesting and distinguishing features that can easily be examined, we will take an in-depth look right now. So with the formation of sand, all sand begins as rocks. Skeletal remains, broken shells, precipitates. These are minerals that can come out of the water. Rocks, often composed of different types of minerals, collide with other rocks due to the forces of gravity, wind, and water, and form smaller rocks and fragments. Rocks can be broken up with the roots of plants growing into cracks. These forces continue to break rocks even into smaller rocks until sand grains are formed. The size range is typically between 0.05 and 2 millimeters in diameter. Oftentimes, the minerals in sand, you can have fragments which contain more than one mineral, or crystals which contains one type of mineral. The rounding and aging of sand. Sand grains can be rounded or angular depending on the amount of weathering, the age of the grain, and the hardness of the mineral composition of the rocks that form the sand. During weathering, the edges may break off and become less angular and more rounded. However, if the sand is composed of quartz, a hard mineral, it has more angular edges because quartz does not easily break. The rounding process may take place over millions of years. Sand grains carried by water become rounded slower than wind-blown sand grains because water acts as a buffer. Beach sand usually has more rounded edges due to the greater force of the wave action. So again, on this slide, you can see the amount of weathering, the hardiness of the mineral composition, and the age of the grain can all play samples on how round sand will be. If we look at the overall mineral composition of sand, the color depends on the type of mineral. Quartz is the most common, feldspar, mica, or iron. When we look at the source of the sand, we have continental sand, which results from the weathering of continental rock. It is recognized by the presence of quartz and contains mica, feldspar, and dark colored minerals such as hornblende and magnetite. Volcanic sand is usually dark as a result of the presence of black basalt or green olivine. The source of this sand is mid-ocean volcanoes or hotspot volcanoes like those found in Hawaii. Skeletal or biogenic sand is made up of the remains of marine organisms, such as microorganisms, shells, and corals. And then finally, we have precipitate sand. Water contains dissolved minerals. When water evaporates, these minerals precipitate or come out of the water solution. Calcium carbonate will sometimes precipitate out of seawater, forming the layers of hard particles that resemble the layers of an onion. Sorting of sand is typically done by similar size, color, and angularity. The impacts on sorting is the degree of movement and the force behind the movement. So photographing, documenting, and collecting and packaging soil evidence. Collecting soil evidence, you want to collect at least 4 tablespoons of material from locations. Collect soil samples beyond the crime scene. Proper procedures must be followed when photographing, documenting, collecting, and labeling and packaging soil evidence. A site evidence form is completed, recording the location and description of the crime scene. Then a photographer will photograph the crime scene, and evidence as recorders document the information in a photo log and evidence log. An artist prepares a sketch of the crime scene. An evidence collector collects evidence while working with a recorder who enters the evidence into the evidence log. The evidence collector collects at least 4 tablespoons, as I mentioned before, of material. And then you also want to grab it beyond the actual scene itself. Surface soil to be used as the baseline. This is what you want to grab. Surface soil to be used as a baseline. Any soil that looks different from the surrounding soils. Soil from different levels. And soil from shoes, clothing, tools, vehicles, or other objects from the crime scene. You then want to collect soil samples beyond the crime scene, such as from a few feet north, south, east, and west of the crime scene, and in a perimeter of 20 to 25 feet from the crime scene. Finally, you want to document, package, and label all samples according to guidelines. Using soil to locate grave sites. It is difficult to convict a murderer if you cannot find a body. How and where does one look for a body or grave site? Hilltops and rocky, dry areas are usually avoided for hasty burials due to the difficulty of transporting the body and digging the grave. The ability to locate a burial site depends on being able to distinguish natural from disturbed areas. The digging of a grave site will alter the soil profiles. This will give distinguishing natural from disturbed areas, and detecting sites is easier from the air or a hilltop. When someone digs a grave, soil profiles will be altered. Topsoil and humus, normally found at the top layer, may be located deeper in the ground. Rocks, normally found in deeper layers of the soil, are found on top of the soil. The backfill of the soil has a different color from the undisturbed soil away from the grave. The surface and the depth of the grave site and the type of vegetation changes with how recently a body was buried. Excess soil may be mounded above the new grave because the body in the grave, it is difficult to return in all the original soil. If you've ever been to a grave site, you've seen somebody that's been buried, you might see how it's kind of buried up and then eventually it starts to settle down. So, analysis of soil evidence, microscopic analysis or microscopic evidence of living or decomposing organisms are found in the soil provides information about the origin of the soil. Spores and pollen profiles taken from soil provide evidence of the origin of the soil as well as the time of the year. Coral fragments can indicate that the sand came from warm water. The sand-like remains of the cell walls of diatoms can also provide information as the soil's origin, because diatoms are not found in all bodies of water. Other microscopic single-celled protists, known as forams, have pink or perforated shells, which give some beaches in the Bahamas the distinctive pink coloration, as you can see here in the figure. Macroscopic analysis. This would be looking at botanical evidence such as flowers, fruits, seeds, leaves, twigs, which can all be found in soil and provide evidence as to when a crime was committed, as well as where a crime occurred. Objects that link a suspect to a crime scene, spent cartridges, casings or bullets, sawdust, oils, or glass, jewelry, keys, knives, firearms, and then you have human evidence, which could be bones or teeth. At a crime scene, investigators carefully remove layers of the soil when examining a suspected grave site in an effort to locate all of this type of evidence. Physical analysis of soil. This is examining how the soil is sorted and determining the percentage of sand, silt, and clay. Analyzing reactions to UV light, examining and analyzing soil profiles, and analyzing reactions to magnets. Other physical testing of the soil includes determining the percentage of the sand, silt, or clay, and using what they call settling tanks. Water is added to the soil and shaken to allow the different layers to separate by density, and the proportion of each type of soil to be determined. Using sieve trays and sand to separate sand, silt, and clay according to the size, determine the proportion of each type that's found in the soil. You can analyze the reactions of soil components but to UV light and detect fluorescence. You can examine and analyze soil profiles to determine whether soils were disturbed, the amount and type of soil found in each layer. Other profile are compared to soil profiles found in other particular regions. And then also, finally, analyzing reactions to magnets can detect the presence of iron compounds, which is typically something that's found in volcanic soils. Now, performing a chemical analysis or chemical testing, this can be done on soil samples to determine the water content, the presence of the calcium carbonate, the pH values, the composition of the minerals. Chemical testing involves simple chemical reactions, while other forms of testing involve technology. The water content of the soil is calculated by determining the percentage of water found in the soil sample, and it's measured by the following process: determining the total mass of the soil sample, drying the soil sample overnight in an oven at typically about 105 degrees Celsius, and then determining the mass of the dry soil. And this will give you the percent of that soil which was composed up of moisture. Chemical testing can involve somewhat sophisticated technology, which is used to determine the overall mineral composition. Soil is analyzed using X-ray diffraction, resulting in a distinctive profile. The soil which will be crushed and exposed to X-rays. And then the diffraction pattern is an image which is produced and examined. Each mineral and chemical produces a unique pattern that allows scientists to compare and contrast the patterns produced by evidence samples with the patterns from samples of known locations. Looking at biological analysis, in addition to the microscopic, macroscopic examination of the soil mentioned previously, DNA analysis can be conducted on microbes in the soil using a sample of just about 200 micrograms, which is actually a very small amount. That's a 200 mcgs. A microgram is going to be 1/millionth of a gram. Scientists do not analyze the entire DNA sequence. Instead, they examine the DNA for specific target sequences that would indicate the presence of a particular microbe. Okay, so finally, there have been many advances in the analysis of soil evidence. The advances in technology have improved techniques for locating and detecting evidence, improved databases capable of storing large numbers of soil and pollen profiles have aided investigators in soil comparison and have helped to locate crime scenes. The use of ground penetrating radar, thermal imaging, air reconnaissance by drones, satellite photography, multispectral imaging, electrical resistivity testing, and geophysical prospecting are some advances in the techniques that have been used to locate bodies. High performance liquid chromatography, or HPLC, coupled with gas chromatography, or GC, analysis provides very reliable results. The results from each method independently were less reliable, but when used together, they provide near 100% accuracy about the composition of that particular soil sample. So, in summary, soil evidence and materials are found in the soil from crime scenes, victims, and suspects, and have helped to solve crimes since the late 1800s. Three textures of soil based on particular size. Soil will form in layers called horizons. The pH, texture, and chemical composition of soil influences the type of microorganisms and plants living in it. Soil is formed due to chemical, physical, and biological actions. There are four main types of sand: continental sand, volcanic, skeletal, and precipitate sand, all of which have been defined earlier. When trying to locate potential grave sites, forensic analysts look for areas of mounded soil or depressed soil, changes in vegetation, and cadaver islands. There are special procedures crime scene investigators must follow. Understanding soil and sand helps forensics investigators link a person or an object to a crime scene. X-ray diffraction, an example of a new technology, have improved the analysis of soil. Satellite photography, thermal imaging, photographs from Google Earth have improved our ability to locate grave sites. And that is the end of chapter 13.